I talked with Matthieu Cheminée about his journey to becoming a silversmith, his travels to New Mexico and West Africa, where he gained inspiration and insight into metalworking techniques and designs and the difference between those, being an artist versus an artisan, and what it meant for him to stop making work to please other people and instead create exactly what he wanted. Here's my conversation with Matthieu. Thank you, Matthieu, very much for agreeing to talk with me today, because I do appreciate it a lot.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And you are the first metal smithing artist that I've spoken with.
Wow, it's an honor.
So you're you're special anyway, but you're particularly special, unique in this. So if we were going to jump right in, I would ask you if you can talk a little bit about your journey to becoming a metalsmith.
Wow. Okay, it's a long journey. I don't think I had any attraction when I was younger to jewelry making or anything like that in general, except my dad was a volcanologist and he used to travel all around the world and bring jewelry to my mom. So she had a big collection of, I would say, ethnic jewelry from all over the world. And I was always fascinated with that part. I really loved that. But, I grew up in Paris. And when I turned a little bit after 18, I went to visit a great aunt of mine in New Mexico. She was a painter there. And when I was there, I just totally fell in love with the place. I didn't like school so much. So for me, it was like perfect opportunity to do something new. And, not only I fell in love with the place, but walking in, I don't know if you know Taos, but Taos and Santa Fe, all the shops, it's full of Navajo, Zuni, and Hopi jewelry. And I was just like, loved it so much. It was so beautiful. So that was my first connection with jewelry. But then I met a girl, we were going out for a while, and she was a jeweler. That's how really I got into it. And I learned, I made a few bracelets, and slowly, first technique, stamping, which I still do today. And so I stayed in New Mexico for 7 years. And I learned with Navajo masters, Zuni, Hopi masters, different techniques. So that's really how I got to it. Then after that, I moved to West Africa and I learned techniques for 3 years in Mali with Tuareg and Zuni, Bamba jewelers. It was amazing. It was the best time of my life, I think, those years. And then my wife was from Montreal, so we moved to Montreal. She wanted to go to university, and so I did a jewelry school to kind of like get more the classical side of the jewelry making. And as soon as I finished the school, they actually hired me as a teacher. That's how it really happened.
So a terminology thing, just because I was talking about metal smithing, and I actually wasn't sure what was the right word. So what would you say is the word that describes what you do in your work?
That's a good question. In French, people call bijoutier, which is jeweler, which to me doesn't represent at all. I see bijoutier more as somebody who sell jewelry. I love silversmiths or goldsmiths or metalsmith. Okay. I really like metalsmith. I think it regroups everything. But silversmith is a really nice term, I find.
Silversmith. Okay. I like silversmith. And it's a broader term because when I came to your school and did a course, it was on making knives, not in silver either, actually. It was iron. It was some very, very tough, very hard metal.
Yeah, tool steel.
Yeah, that was that was baptism by fire that weekend. That was I think it took me all day to cut out the knife in the metal.
Yeah, that's it. The knife making, I do it on the side, and also because a very good friend of mine wrote a book on knife making, so he came to do that class, Tim. But in general, it's mostly on jewelry. And once in a while, I do the knife because I love showing how you can make those little knife just with a lot of sweating. No, I'm kidding. From cutting it.
There was a lot. And in fact, the nice man beside me felt sorry for me at the end. He said, "Do you want me to take a turn?" And he cut half the thing in like 10 minutes, the thing that I'd spent all day. He's like, "That's fine. Let me just help you along."
It's because you're a perfectionist. You were doing like the line perfectly.
I was grateful that he stepped in and just look, I think he was afraid I was going to keep everybody behind because everybody had moved on to the next steps and I was still like cutting out the shape.
Cutting, yeah.
It was fun. That was a lot of fun. But if we focus on the jewelry part, then you as a silversmith, there's a few different things I would want to ask you about. But one is of what has attracted you, of the kind of jewelry that you make. What are some of the themes, or what is it that you think you express through that art?
I mean, I'm passionate about, and I'm not sure about the term ethnic jewelry because to me it doesn't mean anything really, and it can be pejorative in some extent. To me, it's actually, before I used to see it as an insult almost, because I've been, I tried to show into galleries, and somebody told me once, it was an art gallery, and they say it's too ethnic, and I started to question that. What does that mean? Now I see it as yes. I love it because ethnic means it comes from different ethnies around the world. That's what attracts me. I love the jewelry coming from old civilization around the world. So it could be, in Ethiopia, all those old crosses. It could be in Afghanistan. They had such an amazing jewelry history. Everywhere around the world, there is place India. So today, I really see it as a compliment. I think it represents a culture, those pieces. And that's what really attracts me to jewelry making. And so my jewelry, I think the technique I use is very old. It's stamping. But I try to use a very old technique. So something that has already history, but I created my own stamping technique through that. And I mix it with diamond and other things. So it's like mixing what we see as an old piece of jewelry, but with the new kind of things mixed to it. That's the idea I'm working on, is to really have the look of an old piece, but that is really represented by the technique of today as well.
For whatever reason, what went through my head in that moment when you were talking is like a chef who's bringing back some of the recipes or the kinds of food that people used to eat but don't eat anymore, but they bring modern cooking techniques. And so they take something that has a lot of tradition, but they reformulate it through themselves and their art to create something that's meaningful for people today too. But you can tell it reaches back to something that has a long history.
Yeah. And I think all my career is about that, is about, I write books, and it's all about to conserve those old techniques. For me, techniques are amazing. People work so hard through generation to create them. And of course, we're losing some of them because of evolution, new machine. Now it's 3D printing. So we're losing a lot. So my passion is to preserve those for future generation. And through book, I think later on, it could be in 50 years, some people might be like, oh, wow, that's how they used to do it. I'm going to do it again. And so that's really what keeps me going in a way.
I hadn't planned to ask you this question, but it's just because you mentioned the word ethnic and then people's responses to you in the galleries. Has it happened to you, because I'll just say, because people can't see you, so you're a white man.
Yeah.
And you're representing traditions from other parts of the world that are not your traditions.
Yes.
Is that an issue for you as far as how people take you and your work, that it's, I can't remember, not cultural appropriation, but is something like that? Do people talk about that with you?
No, I never had anything about that. I'm totally against cultural appropriation. And as much as I work with jewelers all around the world, I never make a piece to sell that is in a style of what I've seen. So that's, to me, is very important. I do make those pieces to teach the technique. The technique to me is universal. The design is private. So it's a very thin line. And the stamping I'm using, it's a technique that's been used all over the world. I learned it with a Navajo, but it's a technique, in Europe, everywhere. For sure, when I started, I used to make more pieces who looked like a Navajo piece when I was young. And, I worked for Navajo people as well. So they will be sold in pawn shop and then sold as Navajo jewelry. It happened. But really early on, I went into my own direction. And even with stamping, I created really my own stamping, which I'm known for even through the Navajo Nation now, because I wrote a book on stamping. And I included 20 artists that work with stamp to show the different, same technique, but what everybody created with that technique. So the technique for me is universal, but it's very important to preserve the design to where they come from, and they should stay in that domain.
So can you just briefly describe what that means, stamping? I'm sort of picturing like something with like a stencil kind of that you hit it on.
Stamping is it's a little steel bar, and on it you create a design, so a pattern. And this is done by file, and then it's hardened, and the stamp can be used for life. And then with a hammer, you hammer it on the silver, and then you have that little pattern. So that's a stamp, and it's a stamp pattern. So whatever you do with that, the pattern you're creating and everything, it becomes unique.
So your choice of pattern even, and then the way that you apply it to the metal, that's particular to you.
Yeah, what I did is now I create full texture. Instead of just putting one stamp here and there, I create a full texture, and I cut out inside that texture a bracelet or ring or things like that.
What was it about West Africa in particular that attracted you so much? Because I know you still go back there often.
When I met my wife, her mom was a volunteer in West Africa. And so we met, and 3 weeks later, she was going to go and live with her in West Africa. And she said, "Why don't you come for a few weeks?" And I stayed 3 years with them. So that's how it happened. And it was my first time in Africa, in Mali. And I mean, I think for a few weeks, I could not even speak because my mind was just blown away by everything, the color, the smell, the people. It was just like such a unbelievable place. I was 26, and my wife was doing schooling there. So I will actually drop her at school and walk the street. And for 3 years, I really walked the street, meeting people. Each time I will see artisans, I will work with them. I carved a djembe, I did bogolan, mud cloth, everything I could find. And what really blew me away, I had no money at the time, but nobody ever asked for anything in exchange of showing you something. So to me, that was like, I don't know, it was just, I could not even express. And so for 3 years, when I worked with jeweler in a Tuareg encampment and everything, nobody ever, and bring you lunch, bring you tea. It's like just, so I totally fell in love with the place. And so I kept on going and going and going. And then I created with Tim McRae an organization to help jewelers there, because for me, it was a way to give back to how much generosity I got in the first place.
So that's the Toolbox Initiative, is that right?
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, the Toolbox Initiative is a nonprofit organization that, when we created it, at first was to get used tools from jewelers in North America or around the world and bring it to West Africa. And so at each trip, we will bring tools. I mean, I've been going to West Africa, since the 96. Each time I will go back alone, I will bring little tools, a little bit of silver. And when I met somebody, I will give them tools and metal. And I was writing a book on West African technique at the time. And Tim McRae is my editor. And I needed one more technique. And I was going to Senegal, and he never been to Africa. So I said, "Do you want to come to see how it is?" And so when we were there, he said, we could do that bigger. And of course, he's very well known in the States. So we started it, and big company gave us tools, and it became quite, moving. We got a lot of tools, and slowly we got money. And so we've been giving a lot of tools. And since COVID, we could not give tools, and people didn't have work, so we sent money. And so then we got more and more money, and we will send money to, during COVID, I think we sent to over 300 jewelers money to be able to just buy rice or anything. And we decided to also open schools. Now we have 5 schools. We have 3 schools for young girls, a regular school, math, French, things like that. We have a leather school and a jewelry school. And we're actually moving more towards the education now, because I think it means more than just the tools. Tools goes a long way, but education in a trade or general education, I think, is more powerful.
And then you also run a school yourself here, not a education style school.
Yeah, I
skills.
offer workshops. Yeah.
What do you like about teaching?
It's a little bit the same as for writing the books, is to share techniques that I got lucky enough to learn through traveling or through friends or through like that. So it's just to share that part so more people can have access to it. I think that's what I really like. I mean, I taught in different schools just the classical jewelry, how to sew for a month, how to solder for a month. I like that, but not as much as just sharing practical techniques. And since I opened that, I offer a workshop even for people who never did anything, like making a ring for just one day, just to have like a sense of how things are made. That's always what it is, I think.
Something else just came to me as you were speaking, because when I went to read a bit more about your work, and there's this theme of recycling also that runs through. So you create the stamps, you can make the stamps out of recycled materials, and you can also stamp into recycled materials. And there's a way in which I think maybe a lot of what you're doing is this constant, not recycling, but renewal. So take things and reuse them for new purposes, use some of the older techniques and use them in new ways. So this constant renewal across lots of different things that you do, I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I think I got that from traveling to Africa, where everything is always repurposed, and no attachment. People often melt a piece of jewelry to remake a new one. And it's like each time you see that piece of jewelry being melted, you're like, oh my God. But I learned through that, and now I do it. Like I make a bracelet. I like it, okay, but if it doesn't sell for a few months, I will remelt it and make something new. It's like a new life.
Yeah, which there's not that many different art forms that exist in a physical form that you can undo and then redo that. Drawings and paintings and those things, that doesn't work.
No, that's true. Woodworking, you cut your piece of wood, it's finished. And what I love about metalsmithing, silver or gold, because still it's harder, of course, but you can just non-stop remelting it and change it. Yeah.
Wow, that's cool. If we look again at your work as an artist, so outside of the writing and the educating, you as an artist, what would be some of the challenges that you might have faced, and how did you overcome those?
Well, I think some of the challenge as a jeweler, or probably as an artist, I would imagine in general, which, I mean, it's a tricky line, because the artist, for me, it's So I never look at myself as an artist. I really look at myself as an artisan. It's all about, again, it's about the technique. I think I'm always blown away by artists because they have such amazing ideas and they control, like they know how to draw something. For me, an artist is more like a painter, or I don't know. I have this thing about artist and artisan, but I think I'm more an artisan. And what's hard is, you're always, and now more with like Facebook and Instagram, you see so much stuff. If I look at jewelry, I see so much stuff on jewelry. And so one thing that is hard now is like how to not copy anything, because you're always getting ideas, no matter what, from things, but you want to be your own. And so that's one part that is tricky sometimes. To find new model, to create new model is always a tricky thing, because to try to be with the wave of what's going on. And at one point I decided to just do what I like instead of trying to follow. And since that, it's working very well. And I think that was the help of when my parents passed away. I went to see someone and to talk about things, and we talked about work, because I used to kind of make things to please people, to please a gallery or to please such and such. And I got totally lost in that. And she said, just try for 1 year to do exactly what you want, but stick to it. And it changed my life as an artist. Because I really, as an artist, you see, I said it, but
I wasn't going to say anything.
Yeah.
I was just going to let that go.
Yeah, as an artisan, it changed my life, because all of a sudden I realized, oh, that's it. I have to do it for me and not to please people. And since that day, I just kept riding that wave. And of course, I have time where it's tricky to find new ideas. But I'm really lucky enough that today I have the teaching, the book writing, and that, so I can, when I don't have ideas, I switch to something else, and then it comes. It's like a flow of I can do 3 different things and always enjoy it.
If I try to understand that a bit more, what was the biggest risk for you of actually doing what you wanted to do? Was it not being in line with what everybody else is, like the zeitgeist of the time, or is it the practical stuff of, is this going to work? Is this going to sell? Are people going to want it? Can I support myself?
I think that's more that.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it's more like, stamping for me was what I really liked to do as a technique. And it was the idea was to develop my own technique from stamping. And when it happened, that was so easy. Now it's just, now I know Navarro friend that start using my technique.
Nice.
And to me, that's the biggest compliment I could ever get. And it's always like a full circle. So I love it. It's just perfect.
I'm going to switch gears a bit and just ask you more specifically. We are talking about taking risks and challenges that you faced. And so if I were going to ask you what vulnerability means to you in your life as an artisan, what would you say?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that. So it's a hard one. I think vulnerability to me will be more to, when you share anything that you make or anything that you say, you open the door wide open. You can easily get hurt, in a sense of, if somebody likes it, it's one thing, but if somebody doesn't like it, or let's say when I will go to a gallery and people said, no, that will not work for me, that's like, you put yourself out there so much all the time. But I feel the same way in life in general. Like, the more open you are and true you are, the more vulnerable you are in a way. But at the same time, it's funny because at the same time, it goes the opposite. The more open you are, nothing can really touch you at one point. So it's a very thin line to walk on that vulnerability line. I mean, I mean it's a wave. If I'm a little bit depressed, I will feel a lot more vulnerable than when I'm feeling kind of stable and happy. And of course, it's funny because you're also more vulnerable when you show something that you're not 100% proud of. And this happens often. I will make a piece, I work so hard on it, and at the end, I'm like, it's okay. And then I show it to my wife, and she's like, that sucks. So that's when yeah, it's to be so open. But again, when you're so open, I think it can go both ways. You can be actually very strong about it.
So, what do you think is it that gives you that resilience? How do you think you can move from being vulnerable and open and more susceptible to being hurt by the response you get, and then making that transition over to what you described as you're more open about it and it doesn't touch you? What does that look like?
And I don't know if I can pinpoint that. I think it's the point where if you give your 100% to something, actually it doesn't matter anymore. If you gave 80%, that's when it hurts. But if you really do it with love, and if you follow your instinct or whatever it is, I think it's all about what you give to it. And usually when I give to it 100% and I'm actually happy with it, that doesn't matter, the reception. It's when you're actually not true to yourself that it matters.
Thank you so much, Matthieu. Have
My
a wonderful
pleasure.
rest
Thank
of
you
your
so much.
day. Thank you. Bye.
See you soon.